Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. I'm Harvey Levin.
Katie Hayes.
And Jason.
So, another example of how social media is not at all a reflection of America. That if you looked at social media, they wanted to kill Adam Levine. Just basically shoot to kill. He's over. He's canceled. He's done. That is not to say that everybody in America thinks, oh, Adam Levine did everything great. But the idea that everybody gets canceled and that we just jump into somebody else's relationship and then make our own judgments about what should happen, people didn't do that because on Saturday night, he came out on stage with Maroon 5 at Shaquille O'Neal's charity event and got a rousing ovation.
I did not hear one boo.
Not one boo.
No. The crowd went crazy for him. He opened with moves like Jagger, and they went nuts.
They went nuts. And by the way, his wife was there. So, Jason, you look pensive here.
No, I'm not pensive at all. I mean, how many times do we have to have how many times do we have to have the conversation about how social media comes out and tries to cancel people desperately? And look, there are people who are canceled for committing heinous crimes. But for somebody who commits a moral issue between he and his spouse, and people don't care. And it even goes beyond that. We've seen it, with the use of the N-word by country singers and things like that. People just don't care. They like who they like. Even R. Kelly, with the heinousness of those crimes, was largely forgiven by his core fan base. Now, he was criminally prosecuted and convicted. It's a different story.
I think that's a bad example.
But it's kind of true, because when it comes to music, if you like the song, it is hard to remember whatever the artist did that upset people. Even we saw it with MJ, right? With all the rumors surrounding him and all of his controversy. No, in R. Kelly too. If an R. Kelly song comes on, people like it. People listen to it.
Okay, but I think there's a measure of hypocrisy in that a little bit. I'm just talking about that social media is just, these extremes where, I mean, it's basically a hate fest that somebody says something and you hate them for it. And I mean, that's what social media is. And these extremes have this megaphone, and for a long, long time, everybody assumed it was fact. Everybody assumed that was America. And still, companies are canceling people. They are muting people. They are doing all sorts of things out of fear that the company itself is going to get dragged on social media. And that's going to ruin our country. And I feel like maybe there's a reset here. Maybe.
You think Adam Levine turned it all around?
No, I think it's just been slowly building.
You think the reset is that people are finally aware of the fact that it doesn't actually impact the business, that you can maintain business relationships with otherwise canceled celebs, and it actually isn't going to hurt them that much because people are going to continue to invest in the people and the products they like, regardless of what social media says.
And the other example of what you just said this weekend is Will Smith.
Yeah.
That everybody, not everybody, on social media, people thought he's done, he's cooked, he's over, he will never come back. And Will Smith triumphed this weekend. He
had a screening of his new movie, Emancipation. I guess Apple did it. I think it's created for Apple Plus, right? It's going to be straight to streaming on Apple, I think.
And Apple shelved it because they got scared after the slap.
And apparently it had rave reviews. Everybody who saw it loved it at the screening, and they are very hyped now on the potential success for this movie, which, to your point, is a tremendous turnaround from what's been 9 months now.
Right.
We all talked. I mean, he was actually. I don't think anybody thought that Will Smith his career was doomed.
Oh, people were nuts then.
But I do think that had you asked people back then, do you think in 9 months he could have a real sort of tour de force movie that's going to be launched on the world's biggest streaming services? The answer would have been no. And here we are.
And the movie, by the way, it was screened by the Black Caucus, as well as the NAACP, and others. And the irony to this is that it's getting a lot of Oscar buzz. He can't go.
He can't go, exactly.
But who cares? He's back.
He's back. His speech was great. I mean, he's been doing this slow rollout, right? We've seen him just come out kind of every month, and this is kind of, to me, his final step, and he's back.
He's back.
With Stella.
Your call. You want to do Billy Eichner first, or you want to do Bill Maher?
I'll take it. So Billy Eichner, whose new movie Bros just came out in the box office, and by all accounts getting terrific reviews.
And it is a kind of a gay rom-com.
It's sort of an Apatow style rom-com, a little bit of slapstick, a little bit of silliness, but
Everybody who's seen it loves it.
But Billy Eichner's gay. The whole movie is about the gay community. Everybody loves this movie. And Billy Eichner, by the way, is a genius. Has anybody ever seen his comedy?
Funny.
He is fantastic. And this movie's gotten great reviews, but the people aren't coming out to see it. And
It bombed. It bombed at the box office.
Bad. Do we have the numbers here?
4.8 million gross from 3,350 locations.
So 3,350 locations, $4.8 million gross. I'm no mathematician. That's not good.
Right.
And it definitely was well below what expectations were. There's a $22 million production budget. That doesn't include a lot of other costs, advertising budget, et cetera. And they made $5 million in the opening weekend.
So Eichner says, even with glowing reviews, great Rotten Tomatoes scores, straight people, especially in certain parts of the country, just didn't show up for Bros, and that's disappointing, but it is what it is. He concludes by saying everyone who isn't a homophobic weirdo should go see the movie.
This is going to be an interesting.
So there's a couple things. Number one, I've never heard a celebrity, somebody who's pimping a movie, come out and criticize people for not seeing it. I've never heard that before. Number two, and he really sounds, I think it comes off really poorly for him. He sounds like he's whining, he's criticizing people for not coming to see his movie. There's lots of reasons people don't see the movie, but ultimately he thinks the reason that people aren't coming to see it is because they're homophobic.
In certain parts of the country.
Right.
So there are several weird things about it. One is suggesting that if people in LA didn't see it, they're not, but people in Idaho, they are. I'm serious about this. What does that mean in certain parts of the country? Is it that in LA you don't see it because you want to go to the beach and there are other reasons, but
we know what he's saying.
We know what he's saying. And it comes off, he's a little snobby, and I feel like when he's saying this, but also he's right? I mean,
no.
I wouldn't say in certain parts. If he had just not said certain parts of the country, I think he has a point here.
Does he?
I think so.
Katie, did you see the movie?
No, and it's so funny because I know, but that's the problem is that I actually hadn't even heard about the movie that much. I don't think there's been a ton of publicity for it, and so.
But
this was the first time after I read this, then I watched the trailer and I'm like, oh, this looks awesome. I actually really want to see it. But I hadn't heard of it, so I didn't go see it this opening weekend.
Yeah,
and
but
that's part of the problem.
Yeah, come on. What he's saying is the people who did know about the movie, who chose not to see it, there's a measure of homophobia in that. I mean, I think that's what he's saying.
That is what he's saying.
And hold on, let me just ask you. If somebody chooses, look, there may be people who don't want to see, and let's just start with the premise that everybody says this is a great movie. So that's a given.
Right.
But that said, there probably are people around the country who have not seen this movie who are homophobic. But there are also people who chose not to see it for a variety of reasons and the reason I'm saying that is that look, everything said these days has an impact on politics. And if people feel they're getting labeled a certain way just because they chose not to see a movie for whatever reason it is, and they are otherwise not anti-gay, not against inclusiveness, and all of a sudden they get painted that way, what do you think happens to them?
Yeah, it absolutely makes them recoil, and they feel offended by the allegation. I want to meet Billy Eichner 25% of the way. It is undoubtedly true that in certain parts of the country, humor that is gay-forward humor, I don't know what to call it, but let's call it gay-forward humor, is probably not as what is it, as ubiquitous as it is here, as people don't joke in those ways. And it reminds me
when you say here,
in Los Angeles, in big cities.
Big cities, you have to
admit.
Guys,
do you know the difference between Riverside and LA? It's a world of difference, and it's all part of kind of this Southern California area.
Well,
so
but we're talking about.
Are we talking West LA?
Hold on, you have to admit that in large cities, LA, New York, all these big urban areas are more friendly towards the gay community than if you go to a small southern rural town. You have to admit that,
that's
right?
True.
It's true.
I think it is true. But again, even in LA, I remember going to Simi Valley, and seeing all of these
Sure.
Trump signs, and that's
Sure.
10 miles away.
You're right. You're right.
Yes,
We're being
there's pockets,
imprecise about the pockets. But yes, but here's the thing. Woody Allen, let's take him for example. Back in the 70s, one of the biggest filmmakers in the world. His movies never made a ton of money. I just think in certain parts of the country, Woody Allen movies would never play because that's just not the kind of humor. That's not the kind of thing that.
But does
they
that
trade in.
make the people who didn't
It
see it
does not.
anti-Semitic?
It does not. There are clearly, to the point you made a minute ago, there are clearly lots of anti-Semitic people in this part of the country and every part of the country, but that's not why people didn't see the movie. It's just not their brand of humor, and I think that's what you're seeing here with this movie.
The thing working against Billy Eichner here is, I don't know, are people fully going back to the movies now? Because Neil Patrick Harris did the show Uncoupled, which people call Gay Sex in the City, and it was the most popular show on Netflix for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it was similar to, when I watched the trailer for this, it's very similar to this movie, but it was in, they did a 10-episode run or an 8-episode run, hugely popular, focusing on male gay relationships,
Okay.
rom-com stuff. And it was hugely popular.
There are people
So-
still go. Look, people are going to the movies, and there are movies that have done a lot better than this. And again, I completely understand A, why he's disappointed, and B, how important the movie is. That it's great that that companies are investing in something like this. I think it's great,
Yeah.
and wish it would have done better.
Yeah.
At the same time, if it doesn't, to kind of pass it off as homophobia. Again, there are probably people who wouldn't see it who are homophobic. I mean, undoubtedly.
Of course, sir.
Right.
But then to make others feel like, wait a minute, he's saying because I didn't see the movie, I'm homophobic.
Yeah.
That's when people recoil. That to me is counterproductive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, there are plenty of examples of movies in recent years who have had gay themes, gay lead characters who've done exceptionally well. Moonlight, for example, is one that did phenomenally well, won the Best Picture. There are counter examples that maybe just people don't want to see this movie this time for whatever reason.
I'm going to see it. I'm buying 2 tickets.
It looks fantastic.
Even though you're going alone.
Exactly. I'll turn it around for you, Billy Eichner.
It looks great.
Okay, we are going to move on. Bill Maher.
Oh, boy.
So this is pretty provocative.
Yeah, he thinks people should be able to bone in the office.
Well, but he has a point here. No.
Maybe not physically, but
He's making a point, and it's pretty provocative. But it is interesting that, there are a lot of people who have been fired. Jeff Zucker got fired from CNN after having a consensual relationship with a 49-year-old CNN executive who didn't directly report to him, and it was completely consensual, and yet he got fired. And he gave other examples of this. And he is saying, essentially, that there is an epidemic of loneliness in this country where people feel really lonely, especially young people, and they are having trouble meeting and having real relationships. And the fact is that people meet people where they meet people, and that happens to be at work a lot of times. And the fact that companies are now becoming the parents of their employees and telling them this is what you can and can't do, he thinks is misguided.
Right. He's basically saying you should be able to have a consensual relationship at work with someone on your level. He does address, if there's a power dynamic, it kind of changes everything. But on your level, without having to take it to your HR person and reveal the relationship.
Right.
Like, why are they bedroom police? 2 adults should be able to decide on what they want to do.
Don't smile at me.
Well, now that he says it, Levin.
Okay, here we go. Here's what he said.
And finally, new rule now that Americans are finally returning to the office after the pandemic. Let's let them It's long overdue that America had an adult review of our war on office romance. There's only a few places where Americans meet each other in person anymore. Work, bars, church, and Adam Levine's house. Now, in the Udoka case, the widely reported description of it has been improper, intimate, and consensual. Okay, intimate and consensual, I shouldn't even be reading about it. What people do that is intimate and consensual is not my business, not yours, and not that little leprechaun.
I happen to agree with him here, but I'm also sitting here with the lawyer of the company and the head of the company. So how do you two feel about 2 people in an office having a consensual sexual relationship?
I mean, look, if there is
I'm all for it.
yeah, if
Shocking.
If they're really, look, and Bill Maher said this, if a subordinate has a relationship with somebody they report to, that can be problematic, and especially if there's any change in the way that that employee is viewed, either favorably or negatively. And that's something that definitely needs to be monitored at the very least. But the idea that two people who get involved with each other have to tell HR they're doing it is absurd to me.
It is absurd, but I want to talk about the two examples we talked. You just mentioned Jeff Zucker.
Right.
In his case, he was a subordinate. Everybody's a subordinate to Jeff Zucker. He ran the company. And in this case that we're talking about, the Boston Celtics, Ime Udoka, as the head coach, he is the de facto head of the entire organization. He really doesn't, and he was also insanely powerful within another organization, and he had it with a subordinate. So, look, I don't have a problem with what he did.
But why? But I don't believe in Jeff Zucker's case. She reported directly to him.
No, but didn't she also get? Wasn't she advanced through the ranks because of her relationship with him?
Not that I know of.
Oh, really? Because I thought that was the big thing, is that she moved up the ladder.
If the possibility, there's two things that HR is looking at. Number one, is there a quid pro quo? Obviously, but number two,
and if there is, it's wrong.
And if there is, it's wrong. Everybody agrees with that. And number two, will other employees feel that they are being passed over for legitimate positions or certain work opportunities because of the intimate relationship between the senior executive and the less senior person? Jeff Zucker, in CNN's case, he ran the entire network. He was the head of the entire network.
Right.
Anybody who he's in a relationship with, others will feel, and I think it's hard to deny that it's possibly true, right? If you're intimate with somebody, there's going to be a desire to make that person to push their career along. So I just think that
I get your point on that.
Yeah.
But what about just two people in the office?
It's not a problem.
It's not a problem,
yet
but
he mentioned,
is it a problem? I mean, I guess it's a personal decision, but if Jack and Jill are dating and work closely together at work, and then all of a sudden they separate, it gets a little dicey if they can no longer, if it gets awkward, if they can't do their job, if they don't want to work with each other.
Where they meet? Where's Jack and Jill meeting? Where are they meeting?
In the copy room, apparently, to Bill Maher. According to Bill Maher.
Where are they meeting people other than work?
Well,
but that is an issue. And he gets into this at the end. That loneliness is a mental health issue. It really is a mental health issue.
I know, but it's not like people don't go to bars. There's a million apps
like
you can
he said,
people on.
You fall in love with who you fall in love with.
Look, it's absolutely true, but the idea that we have to let them
why does this have to be so pristine and parental?
It doesn't. But
it doesn't. I mean, I don't believe in bedroom police. People should do what they want, but I do think
if two PAs in the office, fall in love, or people on the news desk, or editors, or whatever, and by the way, that's happened.
Yeah.
I don't know about the love part, but yeah, that's totally
that's what it comes.
Well, no, I mean, it's happened. It's like, congratulations.
Yeah. No,
you're
absolutely
right. It could get messy.
Yes.
But do you then say, no, you can't do it?
No. I mean, I think it would be ridiculous to fire someone over having consensual sex with someone else in the office. It's ridiculous. But I don't believe in bedroom police on any level, so...
You think it's okay for, and I'm just testing this, the head of a company to sleep with, the head of a studio to sleep with a PA, sort of the lowest level, entry level position?
No, but I also think it's going to happen, and it's consensual. Because if you're a PA, hey.
But I do see the distinction.
I do too.
We all see the distinction between somebody with that sort of power dynamic. That's
the power dynamic throws it all off.
That's really what it is.
But the weird thing is, it's true. You fall in love with who you fall in love with.
Yeah, but so what? It doesn't mean you get to sleep with everybody. If you're married,
it's not sleeping with everybody.
No, but if you're married and you fall in love with somebody else, it doesn't give you the moral right to do whatever you want. There are all sorts of limitations on the people we fall in love with. We can fall in love with anybody.
No, but I'm saying if you got two people who spend 10 hours a day at work and they don't really have a social life, aside from the weekend or whatever.
Sounds like a terrible job.
Yeah. Does anybody know anything about long days with no real...
You really want to go down the road? You really want to do it?
Oh, I think we should move on to the old hurricane.
Hurricane run.
Look, I just think this is interesting. Cameron, what's the final vote here? We put polls up on the website every weekend. And we put a poll up this time saying DeSantis' response to the hurricane. And we said, was it a good response or eh? Well, the large majority of people said eh. the reason I wanted to raise this is that, look, this is aligned almost perfectly when we put these polls up with the way people feel politically. And I'm just going to say personally, there's a lot I disagree with DeSantis, a lot of issues. But at the same time, he did a pretty good job here. And not perfect. And now there are things that came out today, but this poll was before today, that he may have been slow in responding in one county, or officials may have. But overall, even Biden said, which, to Biden's credit, because they may end up running against each other. But even Biden seemed cooperating with DeSantis, and it felt like
they were mutually sort of giving each other plaudits for their jobs. Well done.
They did.
Yeah.
And yet America won't do that. And it just shows the tribalism that if you are opposed to somebody generally, you can't in any way say they did a good job on anything. And it feels that way here.
It sure does. I thought he was getting sort of rave reviews. I know that some stuff came out today that was a little bit negative, but this poll presumably didn't really account for that. Those numbers. And it's just, it really is. It all comes down to how you feel about somebody going into a situation. The other thing to keep in mind, the idea that you can handle one of these situations perfectly is just farcical, right?
I don't think anybody.
Yeah, there's not one leader that could walk into, a situation like this and just come out with 100% rave reviews.
It's a hurricane.
Just impossible.
People are going to die. There are going to be services that are going to fall behind because of the incredible effort it takes to pull these things together. That's the way it goes. You have to look at and maybe it's unfair to look at people in these worst of times generally.
Do you think people who said he did an job really kind of analyzed what he had done?
No.
I don't. I'm sure some did, right? We were reading reports that people in Fort Myers just didn't have water or toilet paper. That's what I was reading this weekend. So I was like, okay, there is definitely room for improvement here. You're supposed, how is that happening? Days later, it's really difficult. But like I said, any leader in this position is going to
the idea
fail on some level.
Yeah, a different governor would have made it so that didn't happen.
Right.
It's pretty silly. it's just.
So I would have clicked the
There can
button.
be examples. There can be examples. George Bush flying the plane over Katrina and looking down.
George
that
Bush
was really awful.
was awful.
That was awful.
George Bush was appalling.
That was awful.
But it's like I just feel like this is such a mirror because, look, he did a pretty good job here, I think.
Yeah.
And, you can say that even when you disagree with a lot of other things that he does, because then you're looking at things individually.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, I don't know.
It's interesting. It's been overshadowed because he's relatively popular in Florida, but DeSantis has a very difficult gubernatorial race coming this year.
Yeah.
And those numbers are within 6 or 8 points, and it'll be interesting to see if we see movement either way on the polling for this race. It could be a make or break moment for him because if he loses the governorship, there's no way he runs viably for president.
Then you obviously never you never studied Richard Nixon.
Well, it was a couple years later, but you're absolutely right. Richard Nixon famously lost the California governorship after he had lost the vice presidential.
Lost the presidential
election.
election.
Kennedy.
Lost in 60 and then lost in 62 running for governor.
Yeah.
And everybody said, Nixon said, you won't have Nixon to kick around anymore.
Yeah.
6 years later, he was president.
Yeah, for 8 years.
For 8 years.
6 years
well,
until he
6
got
right.
impeached. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we will see you tomorrow, folks.